One of the things that we need to do when we design systems is recognize that sometimes things will go wrong. The question then is, how can we minimize the damage? So how can we discover an attack early? How can we alert people? And then ultimately, how can we piece back together what happened so we can understand how the attack worked and hopefully prevent it again in the future, not to mention minimize the damage that's already been done. So have a think about capturing the following when key actions are performed in a system. So there's 3 important things you want to think about capturing: who, what, and why. So for example, when an important action occurs in a system, something like a logon for example, who was it? What was their IP address? And what was their user agent? Capture this, store it. It's very useful information. In terms of what resource was hit, and of course when was it hit? This helps reconstruct what happened. And then why? What was the action that was performed and what was the data that was passed? Now of course, if we're talking about something like a login, we don't want to capture the credentials and store those in the log. But it is always very useful to capture anything of a non-sensitive nature that you can actually store in logs. Particularly post-incident, all of this data is enormously useful. Now it's enormously useful to those who are managing the systems, but a lot of this is also really useful to be able to display back to customers. Let me give you a perfect example of that. When I log on to Facebook and I go to my security settings, I've got a really good history here of my most recent logins. And I can see right up the top, I logged in today just after 11 o'clock in the morning. I was using Chrome on Windows 10. And in this case, it didn't know where I was. But when you look at the previous few logins, it tells me that I was approximately in Southport, Australia. And then a couple of times before that, I was in Melbourne. So I was logging in from different places, usually on Chrome, but one of these logins was also via iPad. So this is a great way of me now being able to go back and say what happened with my login history. If, for example, I'd seen something unusual or suspicious with my Facebook account, I could go here and see if someone else had potentially accessed it. I can also end activity, so I can log these accounts out. And that's really, really useful in case I did find someone logged into my Facebook. So as a countermeasure for social engineering, when we go back to that scenario of an adversary potentially having legitimate credentials for someone's account, this implementation can make it much easier for that person to identify what was going on and then minimize the impact. But there's another way that's even more proactive than this. Let me show you what I mean. Earlier on, when I logged into my Facebook account, I decided to do so over a VPN that had an outbound connection in Hong Kong. Now that is not a place I normally log into Facebook from. And immediately after I did that, I got an email notification just as you see here. It wasn't usual behavior. And as you can see here, it was also from a new browser or device. So this is a really great proactive measure. On receiving this email, if I thought this was suspicious, so for example, if someone had socially engineered my credentials out of me, I could then log into Facebook, review the screen that we just saw, and if I wanted to, log them back out. This doesn't entirely fix the problem. The attacker did still manage to log into my account, but it significantly reduces the impact of it. Logging, auditing, and monitoring is a really good fundamental security control that can greatly mitigate the risk of social engineering. Let's move on and take a look at something a little bit different, and that's identity monitoring.